Okay, from the Wall Street Journal. Chinese workers load crates at a port in Languin last week. And there's a picture here of them loading these big crates on board a ship. It says to start the article here, Beijing, China's spotty record in open markets, will test its efforts to seize the mantle of global economic leadership left by the U.S. withdrawal from the Asia-Pacific Trade Pact. Though Beijing is now poised to expand its regional sway.
President Xi Jinping strong defense of economic integration last week in Davos, Switzerland, signaled China's bid to step into Washington's shoes. As U.S. President Donald Trump hurried moved to overturn decades of global order, Mr. Trump's Monday withdrawal from the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership trade accord brokered by his predecessor provided the first solid confirmation of U.S. intent. But Beijing's attempts to set the global trade agenda and more closely integrate China's economy with the world risks is falling short of the road from rhetoric to reality. Uh, so the United States is pulling out. They're withdrawing from the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership.
But Beijing's attempts to set the global trade agenda and more closely integrate China's economy with the world risks is falling short of the road from rhetoric to reality. So the United States is pulling out. They're withdrawing from the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is a big move. This was brokered by this deal was brokered by Obama. It says China's state-led economy, still riddled with trade barriers, particularly in the investment and service sector, is at the forefront of global trade negotiations. Trade experts say, adding it is governed often vaguely by policy and short on property rights protection. It says, I'm bemused by President Xi Jinping's waving of the free trade banner at Davos when China is still so far off the mark, said Alan Oxley, a former Australian trade negotiator and chairman of the Australian APEC study at RMIT University in Melbourne. Most people in business who understand the market would not say China represents the next step in a market opening. A survey of members of the American Chamber of Commerce in China released this month found that the percentage of companies that rate China among their top 3 investment targets fell to 56%, the lowest since 2009. 4 out of 5 companies said they felt less welcome in China than before, nearly double the rate from 3 years ago. European and Japanese companies voiced similar concerns. This whole thing is pointing toward a change in world trade, a change in the whole global structure of the way trade functions. The pulling out of these partnerships, like the NAFTA, and is on the rocks or on the ropes, and so is this Trans-Pacific Partnership. In fact, the United States has pulled out, and this represents an entire change in global trade, and things are changing so fast right now. It's exciting times, really. I've never seen anything like it. So let's read on a little bit here. Last week, China introduced a plan to lure more foreign investment and improve access in over 20 industries, but it's released few details on how the policy would be carried out. Still, a U.S. less engaged in Asia gives Beijing more leeway to shape regional economic development, says analysts say. Well, they can shape all they want. The United States is the biggest market. They're the biggest. They're the biggest market on earth, and if they pull out and leave Asia all to our own, those countries have been. They need the American market. Otherwise, for the most part, they're dead in the water. Still, they would never admit to this, but without America, exports from China, exports from Japan, exports from China, exports from these Asian countries they don't have the market that they need without the American added to that market to complete it. America is such a big block or such a big piece in this puzzle that if you pull America away, if America pulls the switch away from these other countries, it's just like they've lost half of their trade. It's like they don't have the market that they need anymore to carry on the way they have been. And so uh, let's move on here. Beijing is looking at this and thinking, finally, we can leave this mess behind. Zhu Feng, an expert in international relations at Nanyang University, referred to the T.P.P. If Asia Pacific nations become more dependent on China economically, they also more likely to follow Beijing's lead on military and security issues. Now you see this diversification I'm talking about. This pulling away and countries becoming uh it's a movement completely away from globalism. Globalism would have it that all countries would trade more effectively, and they would move together in a way of partnerships and free trade agreements and stuff, so that trade would become worldwide. But this is a pulling away from that, and countries individualizing and becoming uh, more isolated from one another. The way to picture it is to picture the world as a community of, say, like a village, and say there's 12 houses in the village, and each man inside each individual house has a gun to protect his house. He has a rifle, and they all get along, and they're all trading between each other in this village. So, and then picture a time comes when something happens where each one of these villagers decide that he's not going to associate with his closest neighbor. He's going to pull in, he's going to shut his door and lock his door and load his rifle full of bullets, right? And no more trade with the other guys because he's frightened or something. Something happens in the village, and they all start pulling in, withdrawing more. And one guy might say, "Well, look, 3 months ago in this village, we all used to trade back and forth between us. I used to trade with you, and you used to trade with me, and we used to come over for dinner at night, and you used to come over to my house for dinner. And now we're all locked inside our house, inside each of our individual houses, and we got our rifles loaded every night, and we're not talking to one another anymore. We're not trading with one another anymore. This is what's happening. As these countries are withdrawn in, each country, and they're becoming nationalistic, and they're becoming concentric to themselves. It's like they're putting up their borders. They're saying no more people are coming into our country. Not only that, they're also saying we're not going to trade with you. We're not going to trade with you. We're not going to trade with you. We're only going to keep what we have to ourselves. And in this position, I'm not to say whether this is good or bad. I'm only noting what's happening. I'm seeing what's happening, and I'm reporting on it. And so that's my job, is to go and to find what's going on in the world and report it to you people. And this is what I see. So this is what I'm reporting about. Okay, so let's move on here. When more and more countries in the region depend on China for economic growth and investment, and when it talks about these regional powers depending on China, it's talking about the vicinity around China. It's not talking about the United States. It will significantly diminish the security relationship with the U.S. and diminish the incentive or political will to challenge China, said Mai Jing, professor at Singapore Nanyang Technological University. So let's read that over again. China's growing clout forcing smaller countries to recalibrate, security experts say. When more and more countries in the region depend on China for economic growth and investment, it will significantly diminish their security relationship with the United States. So basically, what it's saying here is these countries are going to depend on China more, not on the United States. And it's going to diminish their security relationship with the United States. So what he's saying here is an erosion then of the U.S. dollar's power in these foreign countries. They're going to switch over to China, and they're going to look to China and so they'll start using the yuan instead of the US dollar. It says, and it'll diminish their incentive or political will to challenge China. In other words, China will be the dominant force in the area. It says Mai Ling, professor at Singapore's Nanyang Technological University. A foreign ministry spokesman on Tuesday said China supports free trade and hopes U.S. policy will contribute to global stability. China's blueprint for trade liberalization and its answer to the T.P.P, the proposed 16-member regional comprehensive economic partnership, would build on an existing trade bloc among Southeast Asian nations. The tariff in countries proposed as RCEP members have fallen by 4/5 in the past 2 decades, averaging just 3.1%, according to a trade-weighted estimate from the World Bank. But the China-led pact is less ambitious than the TPP, which would cut or reduce some 18,000 tariffs for groups of Pacific Rim nations in the Americas, Asia, and Oceania, an area accounting for 40% of the global economy. A lack of enforcement mechanisms also risks undercutting China's trade leadership, say trade experts. RCEP members would likely face few sanctions if they failed to comply with its terms, allowing participants wide latitude to violate rules and resulting in a weak agreement. The RCEP pales next to the TPP in other respects. U.S. officials have said it would raise labor and environmental standards, impose disciplines on state-owned industry, strengthen intellectual property rights enforcement, or maintain free and open internet. It is difficult, if not impossible, that the RCEP would be comparable to the TPP in opening up services or investment, Mr. Oxley said. China has moved to expand its economic sway in the United States-friendly countries since U.S. presidential candidates slammed the TPP last year. Beijing signed trade and defense deals with Malaysia, a TPP member. It cultivated warmer relations with the Philippines, whose leader, President Rodrigo Duterte, clinched billions of dollars in commitments following an October visit to Beijing. China went further afield as well, moving to deepen its economic ties with Mexico, which also faces an uncertain U.S. trade landscape. Really, what they're talking about with Mexico facing an uncertain U.S. trade landscape has to do with the 20% tariff that's going to be imposed on them because they didn't pay for a $12 billion wall. Actually, because they have $60 billion a year in a trade between the United States and Mexico, 20% on $60 billion is roughly $12 billion. So in 1 year, it's going to be the equivalent of the price of the wall with the 20% trade smacked on Mexico. So in the first year alone, Mexico is going to pay in the tariff the equivalent to the price it costs to build the wall, the $12 billion. What if Trump decides to keep that tariff on for more than 1 year? The following year, it's going to cost them another $12 billion. The following year after that, another $12 billion. So they'll have paid for the wall 3 times over. Now you see, when you take a look at this, you can see that Trump is actually a businessman, and Mexico would have been better off if they had said, "Okay, we'll pay the $12 billion." That would have been 1 year. Now Trump might keep that in for 6, 7, 8 years. Who knows? If he's in for 2 terms, he might keep it in for 8 years. And they'll pay 8 times $12 billion. So they'll pay for the wall 8 times over. Yeah. Okay. Let's make that point. So, the leader of one U.S. ally, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, said Tuesday that he would try to convince Mr. Trump to change his mind over the TPP. Another Australian Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, said he was talking with leaders from the remaining TPP member nations, including Japan, Singapore, and New Zealand, about salvaging the deal without the U.S. He even suggested Beijing could take Washington's place at the table. Ain't gonna happen, I don't think. That's my opinion. So thank you for watching, and subscribe and like. And this is about this article is about China's bid to fill the U.S. trade shoes and risks the risks falling flat. So uh, can China fill the U.S.'s shoes? I don't think so. Bye bye for now.